Thank you very much for the kind invitation. Yeah, checking the program last days ago, I realized that I'm the only thing standing between you and the coffee break. So I have only 20 slides, no worries, they're very simple. Yeah, I thought about not to be too scientific and also not to be too policy. So I tried to make it some kind of joint venture on these very marvelous ecosystems and try to show you what are the problems, why are grasslands really important, especially in agriculture-driven landscapes, and also would highlight what opportunities grassland restoration has for our sustainable future. So just to get on common points on grasslands. So grasslands are the most common land cover types. If we exclude Antarctica and Greenland, which are covered by technically nothing, just snow, then about 40% of terrestrial land surfaces are covered by grassland. Only in Eurasia, there are 10 million square kilometers of grassland areas present. This means more than 100 times the area of Hungary. Total area of Hungary is there. Only in Europe, there are approximately 800,000 square kilometer grassland areas present. So these are really important land cover types. But it's important to stress what are grasslands, because most of the people have different impressions about grasslands. Grasslands are natural and semi-natural open vegetation types, so they are not covered by trees. And domination of grasses, which is, technically grasses in narrow scientific terminology, Poaceae, but in English they are much wider understood. So Cyperaceae and also Yancaceae dominated vegetation also covered in, and relatively high cover of vegetation. So there are some examples here. On the left-hand side, there is a grassland patch from central Germany, Mesic grassland. There is a dry grassland site, Locro in France, southern France, and here is a Transylvanian slope grassland with the spring cover of Pulsatilla species. But what are not grasslands? So they look quite similar, but these are not grasslands. So on the left-hand side, there is a semi-desert in New Mexico. In the center, there is really beautiful, but this is a heathland dominated by Kaluna species. You can see it in Finland or in Scotland or in some of the northern countries. And here is a sagebrush steppe, which is characterized by an Artemisia species, a sagebrush. And I put also here a Windows background, which is called grassland there, but this is definitely not a grassland, or at least not a natural one. So it's dominated by a single species. It could be a cropland, but they label it as a grassland. So then some kind of lolium-based grassland. And here is also some people call this grassland, but in English it's clear, it's a lawn. So it's not a grassland. But anyway, I just wanted to clarify that I won't speak about this type of ecosystems. Grasslands has many roles in the landscape. They are labeled as ecosystem services. It's really anthropogenic view of grasslands, but it's easier to communicate to politicians why these ecosystems are important. So they provide pollination service. So for example, a Robinia plantation provides honey for 3 weeks. A grassland all over the year, from the early spring until late autumn. Of course, different flowering species there. It has a high capacity of water regulation, nutrient retention. Even agricultural fields, there is a high runoff of waters which can be stopped in the grassland and also filtered. And of course, it can also provide some additional humidity to croplands. It controls effectively erosion, especially in steep places. And it has a decisive role in carbon sequestration. I will have a slide on this. Everyone speaks about forest when we are going to carbon sequestration, but the picture is more complicated than that. There are also several so-called provisioning services. So production of materials, livestock production, it's really important and linked strongly to grassland areas. And of course, it is a habitat of wildlife, which is of course my closest thing to my heart, biodiversity. And of course, if we have talked about mental health, the grasslands have a really huge part of this mental health. We also experienced in the COVID situation when we could go outside, make a picnic. It's more difficult to have in a shrubland a picnic, so in a grassland it's more comfortable. And you can imagine, for example, Stonehenge in the forest. So around Stonehenge also a restored grassland there. So it's really important, and also a part of cultural identity and spiritual experiences. So these are multiple roles of grasslands. But for me, and of course for most of the people working in conservation and restoration, the biodiversity is the most important aspect. There are many animal groups, of course the plant groups also important here, but important nesting areas, the great bustard, the iconic bird of Hungary, and also the steppe zone nesting there. Many butterflies, 2/3 of the European butterfly fauna is associated to grassland sites. And of course, orthopterans, land snails have high diversity in this type of grassland, not only in Europe, but elsewhere. What are the problems? So grassland biodiversity and grassland areas are in decline. The most likely reasons, first, area loss because of intensive agriculture. This was the main driver, but also our urbanization and other transformation to other landforms is one of the major threats. And the remaining patches, if they are utilized, because the area is shrinking, they are more intensively used, for example, because of livestock production. So need for fodder is increasing and the area is decreasing. This means that the remaining patches experiences much higher intensity use than the others, so it will drop of biodiversity. The area loss is really dramatic. So some steppe grasslands in the Western Palearctic lose more than 90% of former areas. There was an excellent study by Hungarian researchers based on the Hungarian grassland types, and they showed quite similar trends for all grassland types, that there is a dramatic decline from the Renaissance area until nowadays in the area of grasslands. Of course, not evenly. Kati mentioned the salinity. The salinity is a very good factor for preserving grasslands, because where the salinity is high, these areas are completely improper for agricultural activities. Oh, they tried it, but they were not really successful. So you can see, for example, here, low bottom, that salt steppes and salt marshes declined not that magnitude than, for example, the steppe grasslands, which have high valuable chernozemic soils, excellent for agriculture. Okay, let's coming to restoration. So we lost a lot of grassland areas. We have to recover it or restore it somewhere. You can see that the two starting points. First, there is a cropland, or there is a degraded grassland stance. We use some kind of measures of restoration. For example, here is a hay transfer method, where we transfer plant material from intact grassland patch to a restoration site, or we can sow seeds, and there are other methods. And after a while, it's depending on the type and other factors, we will recover some kind of species-rich grassland. This is recovered grassland in the Hortobágy region, by the way, restored by seed sowing. There are some scientific or technical challenges during implementing grassland restoration. There are some landscapes you can find easily in Denmark, in central Germany, such landscapes, or in the Netherlands, where there are no natural grassland patches remaining. In that landscapes, it's difficult to find a reference. So we can point some in a biodiverse landscape. We would like to have this type of grassland, but there we cannot point to anything because we don't have that. It is also difficult to obtain seeds of local provenance. So it is not an option that we buy seeds from New Zealand or from the Netherlands, which is an option, for example, even for the basic species of grassland restoration, clover species, for example. So we should use only locally from that region originating seeds for restoration actions. And the actions should be also fine-tuned at the site level. So each site has slightly differences in slope, in inclination. So we should also take care of this. Some cases, the processes are overwritten by the landscape propagule pressure. So if you would like to recover a grassland patch in the sea of croplands, you can expect that the weed seeds will continuously invading the site. So then we need some weed suppression measures in restoration. Large-scale experience is mostly missing. So there are only a few examples when we would like to make it large-scale. You know from the industry that there is a laboratory scale, a small factory, and the production industry. It has different challenges, implementation. Most projects focusing on restoring vegetation. So the soil microbial community, fungus, insects are somewhat neglected. It is considered, oh, they will immigrate later on. So not, yeah, it could be, but not in all landscapes. And of course, restored grasslands should be maintained. Especially in the first few decades, they are very fragile. So they have to maintain and have to suppress the unwanted species there. And of course, if the establishment processes are slowing or not effective, you have to repeat some of the measures. What are the challenges, further challenges, so not related to technical and scientific issues? Low awareness of grasslands. So most people, average people also, I have spoken about, or people in different subjects, they, oh, there is nothing there, there's just grassland. So we can establish there forest plantation to see that there is something. We tried in multiple papers to highlight the issue that you should be aware of grasslands, but forests and forest restoration still dominates in the literature. Carbon sequestration, one of the issues why the forest plantations or forest restorations are pushed, even in the EU biodiversity strategy, there was written that 3 billion trees have to be planted. But trees perform much worse, especially in dry habitats. That's why there are grasslands there, not forests. That's evident. Diversification of vegetation, it's also a very important thing, especially for the soil horizon. And grasslands have much higher capacity for sequestering carbon and storing carbon below ground. I brought, not intentionally, but the same diagram as Reinhard does yesterday, and you can see here temporary grasslands. You can see 7 gigatons above, but 236 gigatons below. And if you add this together, it's much higher than temperate forests do. So especially in dry habitats, the below-ground sequestration of grasslands are really important. And you can see why diversification matters. You can see different species, different soil structure, depth of sequestration, and different depth of roots. So they make a very diverse habitat below ground. So you should also consider this. Of course, there are appearing some other challenges like miracle trees or some miracles. Also in Hungary, this emerald tree, which belongs to the Paulownia group. So they promising that they have high carbon sequestration capacity, they grew very fast, and with this tree, we will solve the problems of aridification. You see here the pipelines below, the watering it. Because you know, if something grows 4 times faster, it needs 4 times energy, 4 times nutrients, or 4 times water to this activity. And of course, the wood of the tree is nothing worth, just paper. Of course, we should also keen to multifunctionality of landscape. In a landscape, there are multi-actors: agriculture, forestry, urbanization, nature conservation, of course, and, for example, tourists. So you have to at least 5 sectors harmonize in a restoration action. And of course, it couldn't be that there will be positive outcome for all actors. But if the net outcome will be positive for the society, then you should go for a particular restoration action. Grassland restoration also helps to protect other habitats. So it could be that, for example, Amphibians is the good example. Amphibians are many cases in the forests, but for reproduction, they move to the wetlands. And if in between that is a street, then we have a problem. There is a road, then we have a problem. But if we have a grassland patch in between these two habitats, then they can easily cross the grassland patch to the forest. And then we can protect those living beings which are not living in the grassland. So green corridor stepping stones are some part of this philosophy. Designing sustainable grazing management, also important. Create a grassland. You have nature conservation benefits, of course, if you used native plant material. You have also agricultural benefits. We have already discussed the beneficial effect of grasslands on other croplands. And also ecological meat production. Much higher prices can be these type of meat sold. More delicious if the cattle is grazing in a species-rich grassland. There are also studies to this. And of course, you have the carbon sequestration benefit. With grazing, the below ground production is increased. And you can reach zero carbon neutral grazing in this type of grasslands. And of course, there are cultural aspects. So if you graze there, traditional breeds, traditional livestock, also herding lifestyle can be conserved with these actions. So multiple sides of benefits. And just to highlight a quite recent phenomenon, so there are a lot of these type of power plants established, voltaic plants established all over Europe. And yeah, there are, it was a really fortunate situation. We defined the term ecovoltaics together with others at the same time. So there are multiple publications at the same time defining ecovoltaics, which means that these power plants also need some soil coverage. And you cannot plant their trees because then, of course, there is a shading. So there you should operate by open vegetation. So if you use this, for example, high diversity seed mixtures of grassland plants, of course, not all of the plants should be included because there are also tall grasses. You use short grasses and short forbs, but with flowering. You can also satisfy honeymakers, satisfy the public because it's flower rich, so the power plant looks great. And there are no management issues because this soil coverage is short and suppress the tall growing weeds. So this is multiple benefits. Of course, this is not grassland restoration. This is something new, a novel ecosystem, but it's much better than to have that one or have invasion or destroy, for example, grasslands by setting these power plants there. Okay, what are the conclusions? What could be the conclusions and outlook? So new restoration law, which was mentioned in the former presentation, provide great support to restoration actions, or we expect at least that it will provide support for restoration actions. But the prioritization, we should be very careful. So not plant trees to everywhere. Let's try to find the most appropriate vegetation to be restored. If it's a forest, then you place there forests. If there is a grassland, then you place there grassland. But please be careful on this. And also, we must make compromises on outcome. So you should not expect in a completely cleared landscape a beautiful and intact natural grassland. You should down-tone your expectations. You can have there a more species-poor grassland, but still a grassland until restoring some of the functions which you would like to have in a habitat. And of course, different sectors and stakeholders should be engaged in that project. So without the resident people, convincing the resident people, convincing the decision makers and convincing all of the stakeholders and actors is vital, especially if you would like to have management long-term for the grassland. At least in the agricultural sector, you should get some kind of agreement because then all restoration efforts go down. I thank the research support for all of the institutes and research programs supported my work. And if you would like to know more about my research, you can check the Google Scholar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Péter. And if there are any questions, then please, it was really excellent.
So thank you very much, this excellent presentation. Maybe it's totally outside of the topic, but I am a physician, so I must ask about this relation. So as an internal medicine specialist concerning the grass, I have two questions. One of them is gastroenterology, the other pulmonology. So the loss of biodiversity of these grasslands, how this can affect the microbiome changes through the food chain like the animals and human, because we know in human that plenty of diseases can occur if the biodiversity decreases. So in your theory, what is your opinion? Can it affect finally the human microbiome diversity? My second question would be pulmonology. I don't know it's an advantage or disadvantage to have a higher biodiversity grass, because one part, if I look at the air cleanness, this is much cleaner air can come, so this could be beneficial. But what about the allergens? Can it be negative effect? I don't know, I have no idea, concerning like asthma or chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases. So one question is gastroenterology, the other pulmonology.
Okay, thank you for the questions. The first question is a really interesting question. I don't know if such studies exist which try to bind this issue that a complex way as you showed. But yeah, so in restoration, it has a very long-term legacy of the former management on the established grasslands. So it doesn't really matter how high diversity we would like to recover. The soil microbiome resembles of the former management or the former legacy of the soil. Especially the nutrient load in the soil can be not easily decreased. After several decades or even a century, we can measure still that nutrient load. So it will be, I can say that the soil microbiome will be much poorer even after a decade than a natural grassland. Of course, if the livestock, for example, consumes more diverse vegetation, it can have also beneficial effects on the produced meat. So via this way, and of course, if the livestock is more happy and more healthy, then it needs less amount of antibiotics and other lesser risk of diseases. And then it has also beneficial effect for the human health, I think, because we got also lower loads of these chemicals for us. Answering the second question, I think that I'm not an expert in that area, but if I properly know that not just the pollen concentration, but also other flying particles, dust, and air contamination also responsible together with this phenomenon. And grasslands are considered very effective in binding, so cleaning the air also. Okay. And in case we have a species poor grassland, it is unstable. And there is a higher risk of weed infestation there. And then weeds can cause problems, especially wind-pollinated weeds.
Okay, question?
Yeah, may I ask that, do you investigate the groundwater flow system before you start a grassland restoration? Because sometimes the groundwater flow system changed artificially. So previously it was good for the grassland, but we have a big drawdown, and after could be is not good one for the grassland.
Yeah, it's again a complicated question. We made, for example, in Egyek-Pusztakócs marshland system in the Hortobágy National Park, large-scale grassland restoration. And there were, especially in alkaline landscape, if they made some agricultural activities, they have lifted a bit the soil. But later on, if it became grassland, it again sinked, and there were these natural water flows forming again there. Of course, you cannot be prepared on those issues when there is a large-scale decline of soil water. For example, in the Nyírség area, there's a situation. And also climate change puts another angle to this problem. We have to restore grassland now, but we have to think about what will be in 10 or 15 or 20 years. So maybe this is also a benefit of high diversity seed mixtures, which have many species in there, and these can somehow balance also the uneven pattern of nutrients and water availability in the soil, but also can more adapt to the changing environment later on. This is this so-called functional redundancy in the communities. That's why species-rich communities more resistant to climate change than species-poor ones. This is also going to benefit. But it's very interesting and very, very complicated issue, also considering the water availability and its temporal fluctuation, of course.
Okay. Oh, there are 2 more questions.
Very interesting presentation. Any intervention will have cost and benefits. So my question is a policy-oriented one. If you go to the local manager, the local ministry, the national ministry, and you propose this kind of intervention, basically you present the cost and benefits in terms of the functioning of the ecosystem services. But do you think it would help if you were able to transpose these costs and benefits the way you show them into costs and benefits for humans over the short, medium, and long run, and have monetization in terms of a way of aggregating these costs and benefits that can be easily communicated and make sense to the policymakers? That is, my experience is that if you tell them, okay, these are the ecosystem services that are going to be supported, and these are the timelines, and these translate into these human benefits, and these human benefits mean so many euros, and they cost so many euros, and maybe this is a better solution for you. Would you be reluctant to do that?
Just to have a brief answer, no. The longer answer is that some of the ecosystem services and benefits are easy to be quantified. So, for example, the harvested hay, the market value of harvested hay. But for example, the clean air or soil retention capacity, it's much, or water retention capacity is much more difficult to monetize.
Yes, but this is 1/3 of my research, and there is a big community of environmental economists working with, talking about interdisciplinarity with biologists and earth scientists that have developed approaches that allow the derivation of these values in structured questionnaires. Now we do them in labs with virtual reality in order to engage people in the services of these ecosystems and then extract from them the willingness to pay for conserving them or upgrading them. And this is not perfect, of course, but it functions like a market, so the more information you have for the benefit that is created, the more you are willing to pay for it. And it might be easier to communicate to these people that we call policymakers. And
that's why we need interdisciplinarity, as you say. So we can say which method is more costly or not. We have also cost estimates, how much 1 hectare grassland restored in this way or that way. Of course, it's a couple of years ago. We made it, but it is still valid for the comparison, not for the net prices. So that part we can say, and also we can say the biodiversity part of why it's more beneficial. The other part should put the other sectors.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we will have a coffee break. And it was really interesting, all these talks. And let's meet here 11:45 to continue with our program. Thanks for all speakers.
Thank you very much.